China's leader is confident he'll be re-elected in November. Meanwhile, China is facing huge crises. A former professor in China is arrested for criticizing China's government. He refuses to plead guilty. Several high-level officials from the US and European Union are visiting Taiwan. Simultaneously, Europe and China have begun trade talks. The Chinese leader made an unexpected visit to Xinjiang province. He subtly warned the Islams there to conform to atheist doctrines. The US has banned products from Xinjiang because of forced labor. Canada and the EU are following suit. Finally, a new Omicron variant has appeared in China. China already has the harshest COVID restrictions in the world. How will it react? Let's get into it. Welcome to Sound of Hope News. My name is Daniela Wolensack, and today is July 20th. China's leader is confident he'll be re-elected, but there are obstacles. The Chinese leader Xi Jinping has invited 4 European countries to meet in Beijing this November. There are Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. China is re-electing its leader in October, so this invitation means Xi Jinping is confident he'll have a third term. On July 12th, Hong Kong's Ming Pao said that Xi Jinping will be re-elected at the 20th National Congress. He will be titled the People's Leader. To gain military support, Xi Jinping promised to solve the major issue of the separated rules of the two sides of the Taiwan Strait during his term, meaning China plans to take over Taiwan. On the other hand, the Chinese regime is dealing with multiple crises. Its economy is dropping, its real estate is crashing, and the Belt and Road Initiative has gone bankrupt. Sri Lanka's current riots are because of that bankruptcy, and China is facing international disdain. It's hard to predict how much China will lose. To help collapsing banks, China will offer 200 billion yuan in new bonds this year. According to Bloomberg, to stop the homebuyer riots, the authorities may allow them to suspend loan payments during a grace period. They won't get a penalty, and it won't affect their credit. A professor at the Icahn School of Business said to the Epoch Times on July 18th that before China's election, China's economy is at risk and could collapse at any moment. It's dangerous to cover up, but hard to get through. A former economics professor was charged by the Chinese regime for subverting state power. The trial will be held at the Guiyang Intermediate Court of the CCP on July 29th. Yang Xiaozhi is 53 years old. He holds a PhD in economics from the Southwestern University of Finance and Economics. In recent years, he was ordered by the Guizhou police to stop public speaking and commenting on current affairs. In 2017, he was forced to stop teaching. He was then expelled by the university in 2018. Despite this, Yang Xiaozhi continues to criticize the Chinese leaders online. He reprimanded the Chinese government for spending an enormous amount of money. He also published the death toll of the Tiananmen Square massacre on June 4, 1989. As a result, the CCP authorities detained him and placed him under residential surveillance for half a year. He was later arrested. Yang Xiaozhi refuses to plead guilty. He believes that if those in power can bend the law and abuse that power, every Chinese person will suffer the same terrible experience as him. The latest round of trade talks between Europe and China started on July 19th. The subjects include supply chains, energy, investments, and others. The conversation was held online. It was co-chaired by the EU Trade Commissioner from Lithuania and the Chinese Vice Premier. Meanwhile, several delegations from around the world are visiting Taiwan. European Parliament spokesperson Nicola Beer began her 3-day visit to Taiwan on the 19th. This is the first time a high-level official from the European Union has visited Taiwan. Beer posted to her Facebook on July 18th that Taiwan holds the same democratic values as the European Union. The Chinese regime must not undermine peace in the region. On the 18th, former U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper led a delegation from the Atlantic Council to Taiwan. They met with the Taiwan government and exchanged views on security and trade situations in the Indo-Pacific region. Political commentator Wu Jialong talked with Sound of Hope. He said that the exchanges between Europe, US, and Taiwan revolve around 3 main points, stating, "The first is peace and security. The second is democratic value, which is a universal value. The third is economic and investment benefits. These 3 topics are intimately connected and cannot be handled separately." This is the message we saw from these Europeans and Americans' visits. An analyst at the Mercator China Institute, Francesca Giretti, spoke to Taiwan Central News Agency about the Sino-Europe trade talks. She said, "I would not expect any new agreements coming out of these dialogues." Chinese President Xi Jinping made an unannounced visit to the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region on July 12 to 15th. He subtly warned that Islam in China must be Chinese. Most of China is from an ethnic group called the Han. His words mean the Uyghurs have to conform to the majority, including language and culture. Xi said, enhanced efforts should be made to uphold the principle that Islam in China must be Chinese in orientation, and to adapt religions to a socialist society, China state media reported. He insisted religious followers must stay close to the Chinese Communist Party. International human rights groups and Western governments have accused the Chinese Communist Party of persecuting the Uyghur Muslims. China has tried to alter the religion there, including the linguistic, cultural, and religious traditions. It forces all religions to conform to the atheist party doctrines. Director in China Studies Adrian Zenz said Xi is signaling that nobody can interfere in China's ethnic policy in Xinjiang and that Beijing's red lines are firmly upheld, according to Radio Free Asia. History professor at Georgetown University, James Millward, noted that Xi is trying to create a big China by stressing that all ethnic groups are Chinese. However, UK director of the World Uyghur Congress, Rahima Mahmood, took a close look at the footage. She points out that there are no young men in the background. There are only the elderly clapping for a maskless Xi Jinping. She concludes that most young Uyghur males have been forcibly taken away. In response to Xi's visit in Xinjiang, a U.S. State Department spokesperson said the U.S. is working to promote accountability for the CCP's use of forced labor, as well as its ongoing genocide and crimes against Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. The U.S. has recently banned imports from China's Xinjiang region. This is to stop forced labor. The United States Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act took effect on June 21st. Now U.S. allies are following suit, Reuters reported. The U.S. Labor Department representative, Tia Lee, states that she had engaged with other counterparts, including in the European Union and Canada, on how to implement their own restrictions on goods made with forced labor. The companies should not maintain deliberate ignorance about their supply chains. Lee says the EU's focus on developing a mandatory due diligence standard was a good starting point. Canada and Mexico were moving toward a common North American standard, banning forced labor goods as part of the commitment under a trilateral trade agreement. In June, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington was rallying allies against forced labor as it began implementing the ban. He stated, "We have taken concrete measures to promote accountability in Xinjiang, including visa restrictions, financial sanctions under Global Magnitsky, export controls, withhold release orders, and import restrictions, as well as the release of a multi-agency business advisory on Xinjiang to help U.S. companies avoid commerce that facilitates or benefits from human rights abuses, including forced labor." Under the law, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency enforces a rebuttable presumption that all goods from Xinjiang are made with forced labor and barred from import, unless it can be proven otherwise. Furthermore, Lee said an updated Labor Department list of goods produced with forced or child labor was due out on September 28th. The department would also preview new tools to help meet a congressional mandate to look deeper into supply chains. A new Omicron variant enters China. Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen are beginning new lockdowns and mass testing. Since July 17th, 41 cities and more than 20 provinces in China are in lockdowns. This affects more than 260 million Chinese. In Shanghai, every person must test twice. To enter or leave some communities, folks must have tested negative within 24 hours. These harsh tactics will affect both the economy and the real estate sector. Experts analyzing the situation concluded they are not necessary. Through VPNs, Chinese people are speaking out on international social media. One user says the collapse of real estate is the inevitable result of the totalitarian system of the Chinese Communist Party, and there is no cure. As soon as Shanghai locks down, everyone will see. In those mansions worth tens of millions of dollars, there is no way to secure enough food to eat under totalitarianism. To avoid starving to death in the tens of millions of dollars worth of mansions, abandoning and fleeing has become the only way. The Chinese leader is determined to stop all COVID cases as a political move. China is about to choose its next leader at the 20th National Congress. Current leader Xi Jinping hopes to be elected. But if the economy collapses, will he? American commentator Eric Zhang tweets alarming news. A Chinese entrepreneur told him that the local government ordered his factory to start making military hardware. This means China is preparing for war. He also warned that the Communist Party is going to reuse techniques from the 1950s. It will confiscate the property of capitalists. It will restructure them industrially and commercially, then launch a land revolution to take peasant land. This is to get out of its economic crisis. On July 19th, the Italian Foreign Affairs advisor said that peace and stability in East Asia and the Taiwan Strait are very important to Europe. He referenced the late Japanese Prime Minister's words, "If something happens to Taiwan, something happens to Japan," and added, "If something happens to Taiwan, something happens to the world." Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you saw, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you tomorrow.